Very good. Well, good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen in the UK. Good morning, those of you who are joining us from the New World. My name is Daniel Hannan. I am the International Secretary of the UK Conservative Party. I'm speaking from our party headquarters. Behind us is one of our more successful former Conservative Prime Ministers. And it is a huge pleasure to be joined by one of the bravest and most impressive political figures in the world, María Corina Machado. For those of you who don't closely follow what happens in what's been happening in Venezuela, Venezuela has been under a dictatorship, first with Hugo Chavez, and then after his death under Nicolás Maduro. We have a series of rigged elections and repressive measures which have led to the worst humanitarian crisis and the worst population displacement in the Western Hemisphere. A country that was the richest in South America until the 1980s, a place that people wanted to emigrate to, is now suffering malnutrition and has lost 7 million of its citizens who have fled from the poverty and the repression. On the 28th of July last year, there was another rigged election. And to introduce our guest, María Corina, the opposition parties in Venezuela, knowing that the regime doesn't allow free and fair elections, organized a primary that was outside the control of the state and therefore couldn't be directly tampered with by state forces. This was in October 2023, and María Corina won that with, I think, 92% of the vote. She was then disqualified on a technicality, inescapably. She nonetheless carried on campaigning. The opposition forces rallied behind a retired diplomat, Edmundo González, and the regime was then forced to engage in an almost comical level of vote rigging. And I have to say, I was a member of the European Parliament for 21 years. The usual way of rigging an election is to disqualify the people that you don't like on a technicality. Actually, stealing papers is quite difficult to do. And in fact, it's impossible to do without everyone seeing what you're doing. And we had some extraordinary and almost in other circumstances funny attempts by the regime to call in these bogus figures, which María Corina will tell us about. So I'm going to get straight into the conversation with her. Let me just say to my Conservative, so that this is an audience basically of British Conservative MPs with one or two friends from other right of centre parties in other parliaments. It's recorded, it's open, there's nothing secret about it. We want María Corina to get her message out. I'm going to run through a few questions. If you would then like to put a point yourself, please put it in the chat and I'll see if I can get to you before we finish. We've got 40 minutes from now. So, María Corina, thank you for finding the time to join us. We're very honoured that you've taken the time. Can I just begin by asking you a personal question? What has life been like for you since the stolen elections? You're in hiding, you're presumably moving around, there's crackdowns by the regime forces. What does it mean to you on a day-to-day basis? How are you living?
Well, first of all, this is a unique opportunity for me, for our team, to join you. Thank you to the Conservative Party, to you, Daniel, a really good friend, Lord Hannan, and of course, every one of the honourable members of Parliament of the UK that are joining us today. Well, directly to your question, today is my 250 consecutive day in hiding. During this period, I've been 5 times out in the streets and coming back. Last time it was on January 9, when I was temporarily kidnapped by the regime. They actually fractured my rib when they grabbed me after a very big rally we had in January. And I've been accused of terrorism, as everybody else that were involved in that remarkable, unprecedented citizen event on July 28th, in which we won by a landslide, 70% of the votes, with the most unfair, unimaginable conditions, clearly violating every single Venezuelan electoral law. But not only we won, but in less than 24 hours, we were able to prove it because we collected over 80% of the original tally sheets. We were able to scan them, digitize them, put them on a super robust web page so the whole world could see the results. The regime wasn't expecting this. We surprised them. We were able to organize a legion of over 1 million volunteers throughout the country. And that's why we were able to prove our victory. The result was the worst persecution and repression campaign unleashed the day after of the election. Over 2,000 people were put in jail, tortured. Many of their homes were marked, and women and children even were disappeared. And most political leaders have even flee the country or are in hiding, as I am right now. We're all being accused of terrorism, and the regime and Maduro says they're looking after me and that I will spend the rest of my life in prison.
And how you're speaking to an audience of politicians, so we understand maybe better than some civilians that you're a human being as well. I mean, what does this mean to you personally? You have 3 children. You're not able to set foot outside. You can't. Presumably they would let you leave the country, but only if you went permanently into exile. What are the? Do you find yourself making these trade-offs, asking yourself whether it's worth it?
Well, I've been banned from leaving my country for over 11 years. And since 8 years ago, I'm not even allowed to take a domestic flight. So I don't know how my country looks from the sky, but I can tell you I've had a chance to live it and learn about it from within, because I've been traveling Venezuela with my own car. So I thought it was a huge flaw, and it turned out to be a great opportunity. I had to send my kids away 15 years ago. I've missed very important moments in your life, and I know you understand how guilty you feel when that happened. My mom has been several times in the hospital, and I'm the one to blame. That makes you really guilty as well, but at the same time, I'm doing what I've got to do and what my family had taught me to do. I can only conceive my life in Venezuela and in freedom, and we're determined to give our children a country that they can feel proud of, and where every single Venezuelan children can make their dreams true. And we will have millions, not only of our own kids coming back home from the citizens around the world coming for the country that is going to offer the largest opportunities.
So let's talk for a little bit about those opportunities. Paint a picture for us, María Corina, of a free Venezuela with suddenly reintegrated into the world economy and tankers full of oil landing in the ports of every free country, investment coming back in, exiles returning. What are the opportunities? Geopolitical, economic. How will the world be different under a democratic regime?
Thank you. I love that question. First of all, we have to understand that Chavez and Maduro have turned Venezuela into the criminal hub of the Americas. Over 60% of our territory is under control of criminal groups that go from drug cartels to Colombian guerrilla to extremist groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas that have operations in Venezuela. Certainly all kind of criminal networks that explode gold, other minerals, human trafficking, and today, most of Colombian drug go through Venezuela. We're talking about over 300 tons of drugs and are starting to be produced inside our country. And the economy has fallen more than 80% of our GDP in the last 10 years. And just to give you an idea, minimum wage is $1.5 a month. Our children only go to school twice a week. So, as you said, the country that has, the largest oil reserves, proven reserves in the world, 8 reserves of gas, 11th reserve of sweet water, 5th reserve of iron, is today poorer than Haiti, poorer than Cuba. So we have, Venezuelan people have learned what socialism represents. And when you make a mixture of socialism and crime, then it's devastation. So we have today a country that is longing for freedom, that respects and wants private property and our family values more than ever. I mean, this is unique from a cultural perspective for Venezuela today as a society. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to bring trust. We need to build institutions that serve the society and not a criminal group, which is what is in Venezuela today. We need to open our markets. We need to have rule of law. Just to tell you something, Venezuela today is in the last place, the last world globally place in rule of law by the World Justice Project in 140 points. We need to bring back respect for the law and enforce of it. And certainly we need to take control back of our territory. We have prepared our plan to develop Venezuela. We know what we need to do the first 100 hours and the first 100 days. We need to take, of course, as a priority, our people that are suffering hunger, and we need to give them results in the short term. But we're going to go through the most incredible transformation from a institutional perspective that has ever taken place in this hemisphere, and we're ready to do it.
And can I just ask you how that will look for other countries? So as a Venezuelan, you will benefit from the rule of law, from the investment that will follow, from being able to be in school again, et cetera, et cetera. What's the knock-on effect on the region, on Cuba, on Nicaragua, on the other delinquent regimes? And what's the impact on, let's say, the second-order issues like the population movements, which have been unprecedented and which I think are, to a degree, driving the domestic politics of the US as well? How does the Western Hemisphere look?
Okay, I will address that in terms of what's at stake in 3 dimensions. First, let's go to a security issue. Here, we have to understand, as I said before, that Venezuela is a criminal hub. Maduro is not a dictator. He's the head of a criminal structure that has networks that have expanded from Chile to Canada. Just to give you an example, the Tren de Aragua, well known, has operations in already 8 countries in the region. And in the case of Chile, it was proven that the top officials of the Maduro regime ordered the murder of a Venezuelan dissident, Lieutenant Ojeda, a year ago in Santiago de Chile. And it was executed by members of the Tren de Aragua. The Chilean government denounced this at the International Criminal Court a month ago. And this has been happening throughout the region. So we need to dismantle these groups and build a security shield in Venezuela in alliance with strategic partners, not only the US and Latin American partners, but the UK as well, and other European countries, because these networks even reach Europe. Secondly, and of course, in terms of what you meant, migration, I mean, we have to understand that these type of flows are not only a consequence of bad economic policies. They have been intentionally designed by the regime. Maduro wants the Venezuelan people and families to separate and use migration and weaponize migration, as we have seen in the past, to destabilize other countries. Second, from an economic perspective, Venezuela has a potential of $1.7 trillion in opportunities, not only in oil and gas, in critical minerals, in infrastructure, in telecom. It's huge. No other country has this natural endowment resources, but our location in the heart of the Americas is strategic. And third, from a geopolitical and perspective, as you mentioned, it's not only getting rid of Iran, China, and Russia that operate in Venezuela. Not only that, but believe me, once Maduro is out, then Cuba and Nicaragua will follow. And for the first time in history, we will have a continent free of communism and dictatorship. And at the same time, this will bring democratization wave in countries such as Honduras, Bolivia, and others.
A reminder to my British colleagues, if you'd like to ask Maria Corina a question, please put it in the chat. Let me now ask you then the really difficult question, Maria Corina, which is how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Do we need to turn a general or at least a police chief or something? Does there need to be effectively a military intervention? Is this something that requires the active involvement of the US or of other foreign countries? How do you see a transition of power when democracy has failed?
Well, first of all, to answer that, you have to understand what we have done so far. Not long ago, Chavez was seen as a populist leader that had huge support of the population. And we have proven that, first of all, it wasn't true as it was perceived. But secondly, Maduro has lost total support. I mean, we won 70-30 under rigged elections. If they had been free and fair, it would have been 90-10. Secondly, we proved that the middle and low ranks of the military were aligned with us because we wouldn't have been able to collect the tally sheets if it wasn't by their cooperation. Third, we proved internationally that he's a criminal that has committed crimes against humanity, and this has been said by the missions, special missions and human rights of the UN, and that they commit terrorist practices, and this is said by the Inter-American Commission in Human Rights. So he's been seen today internationally as a criminal. Further, the economy in Venezuela has been collapsing in the last 6 months, and now with these strong measures that have been taken by the Trump administration, he's financially isolated. And I would add one more thing. What used to be those who were the ones who supported Maduro in the past when he had stress moments? Iran, China, Russia, are they capable or willing to do that? And well, Syria, that part of the story you know well. So who is going to come and save Maduro right now? I frankly think he's in a really difficult situation as never before. So I believe that for the first time, all vectors are aligned. I mean, there's huge rejection and growing, even further discontent inside, total international isolation and internal fractures. So this is the moment to push further.
So what's in it for him? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. And I'm going to ask a difficult question, which I understand that there are things you may not want to say, or things you can't say at the moment. But if I think of other examples of where dictatorships have given way to representative governments, we think of the end of communism, for example, in Central and Eastern Europe in 1989, 1990. There were round tables, there were transition processes, and there was something in it for the other side. They were given immunity, or at the very least, they were able to retire, without facing prison. What kind of incentives do you think, if there were going to be a transition, what kind of things might be agreed with the Maduro regime that would facilitate a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, certainly this is a very important issue here, because at the end, the rationale is that you need to increase the cost of staying in power and decrease the cost of living in power. And once those, the second are inferior, then you have the incentives to go. Which incentives? Well, it depends. It depends how we end up in a negotiation process, and it depends to who are you talking about, because there are criminals that have committed horrible actions, and there are those that supported the regime because they had no other option. So at the end, I believe, and I mentioned this before, that when you have a criminal structure and any structure run or network around the world, and you stop the flows of resources, the tensions with them start to grow. That's why it's so important to block these flows from illicit activities, such as the drug business, the gold circuit, the black market of oil, and so on. So when you start seeing these tensions floor, which is starting to happen right now, then you have the possibility to establish different approach to different actors and groups.
Okay, so let me then turn to what we can do. You're speaking to an audience of British Conservative politicians. I think the United Kingdom was the first country to recognize the Venezuelan Republic at the time of independence, not for completely altruistic reasons. We had our own geopolitical objectives, but we've had a very long and friendly relationship. We have not, as a government, recognized the elections of the 28th of July of last year. The Venezuelan gold reserves in the Bank of England are frozen. We don't make them available to the Maduro regime. What could we be doing? What do you need from your friends in this country?
Well, once again, as 200 years ago, I think our interests are totally aligned, and for good reasons. And I do think you realize that Venezuela's transition to democracy is the biggest opportunity and priority in the Western Hemisphere. So I believe the UK, and particularly you, our friends in the Conservative Party, have a huge contribution, because one, I think that currently the UK can also serve as a bridge between the US and Europe. Secondly, I think that the degree of information the UK has that we can share, and the influence the UK has in the region, not only in the Caribbean, but in other Latin American countries, we can form, and the presence of the UK in the G7. And I have to say that we've had extraordinary support in the last years from the UK in the G7 and also in other forums. So I think this is also, I have to insist, the UK financial system has been used in the past, currently as well, by the regime and some of their allies. So this is the kinds of actions we need to look into it. And you mentioned the gold, of course. The regime wants to get grab of those assets and use it for corruption, repression, and persecution. So we have to not allow that to happen. But most of all, we need your voices, because I know that some people think this is impossible to achieve. How are you going to turn down and fall a system that I just described, which is a criminal structure with the support of all these enemies of the West around the world? And I've heard so many times during these last years that everything we have done was impossible. And look where we are. The regime is in the weakest position ever. In their weakest position ever. And this is an historic opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. And we need you to be part of it. And believe me, we will never surrender. As someone said, we will never give up, and we will prevail.
Thank you. Okay, let me turn to a couple of the questions that have been put forward by my colleagues. The first actually just follows on directly from what you were saying about our influence in the Caribbean. One of the ways in which Maduro's regime has crossed people's radar here is reviving the territorial claim against Guyana. I think the last time we really quarreled with the US seriously was in the run up to the when that was first coming up in the 1890s. But would that be different? Tell me your view if you were the president of a democratic Venezuela. What's your view of the border issue?
Well, obviously, this is a very complex issue and it's critical to us. It's not only about land and resources, but it's about the possibility of Venezuela having access to the Atlantic Ocean that Guyana pretends to block now. From historic perspective, we believe we have all the rights and the possibility to prove Venezuelan rights on the Essequibo, but certainly we need to do that in a peaceful and institutional manner. Chavez and Maduro has used this issue as an extortion and blackmail for other countries in the region, particularly Caribbean, and in a very responsible way regarding our own rights. So we believe that a democratic government immediately will address that issue. We will address it professionally with the best lawyers, historians, and military, and of course we understand that now we need to go to the international, how do you say in English? La Corte Internacional de Justicia, International Justice Court.
ICJ, yeah.
ICJ. Yeah, ICJ, exactly.
Very good. And a question from my Ecuadorian friend Francisco Zayas, who is the great apostle of dollarization. I'll give you the short version of Francisco's question, which is, would you consider dollarization as part of stabilizing the economy that you are likely to inherit if you succeed?
Well, I would love to discuss this extensively with Francisco. It is a possibility. Nonetheless, we believe that the most important thing we need to do is put order in Venezuela's finance. We are determined to go through a process of conversations with the IMF in order to restructure our debt, which is 2.5 our GDP. It's huge. And certainly we need to to achieve absolute independence of the central bank and stop the monetary funding. So it is a possibility, Francisco. We would like to discuss it. Would love to discuss it with you, with our economic team.
I wonder if I could just broaden it a little bit, Maria Corina, and ask you about the retreat of democracy globally. In one sense, what has happened in Venezuela is part of a rather worrying trend. You and I grew up, I think, expecting that more countries over time would find their way towards freedom and the rule of law and some kind of representative government. And for the first 60 or 70 years after the end of the Second World War, that was true. It was a patchy process, it was a fitful process, but the trend was unmistakable. And then at some point in the first half of the last decade, that trend stalled and began to go into reverse. And every year now, more countries have moved from the free into the unfree category than the reverse. So Venezuela is, if you like, an extreme example. It's an outlier, but it's not against the trend. Why do you think that is happening? And what can we do about it as believers in free democracies?
Well, actually, Venezuela happened before, and I do think that all Democrats should question ourselves. What didn't we do for this crisis, not only of political parties but of the system as well? Had this failure when people stopped thinking they were doing better or not included, and their expectations were not satisfied. Certainly, the democratic movement in Venezuela brought a huge amount of people into education and opportunities and expectations. And then that creates a great stress and demand for the system to deliver. But I do think that when you lose contact with the true expectations of people and desires, and they feel they're not included and represented, then people look the other way around, and then that's where populists appear and are appealing. So our job now is how do we make these ideas close to people's expectations and how we make them sexy. And that's precisely what we have done. And that's why we have turned this wave in Venezuela for democratization, such strong social and cultural movement that has teared down the barriers the socialist and communist regime have built to divide us between, rich and poor, black and white, left and right. We want the same. We have the same values. And that's why this is so powerful. I mean, we already defeated Maduro in the hearts and souls of the Venezuelan people. And in the tallies, of course, in the polls, we have the last part to do, and we will do that soon. And I think Venezuela will be a great example and testimony for other countries that are fighting for freedom and democracy around the world.
Do you see the possibility of something similar happening in other Latin American countries? It seems to me we've seen some polarization in not everywhere, but in a lot of countries in the region. Populism, pretense that everything can be easily solved. I'm for the people, they're for the elites. It's a very simplistic message, but it seems to me to be more appealing now than it was 20 or 30 years ago, when people were a little bit more prepared to understand that there were trade-offs in things. And corollary of that, if you get in, there will be a tremendous sense of expectation. How will you not disappoint people?
Because we've spoken with the truth all the way. If you heard what we said around the country, I always stood up and said, I'm not here to offer you anything, just work. It is not my responsibility, it's our responsibility. We have to do this together. And when I asked in front of crowds and said, who's going to defend your vote? Perhaps 5 or 10 years ago, people would say, political parties, the electoral monitors, whoever. People would shout, me, I'm going to defend my vote. And that's a strong feeling with which we're going to build our country. Who's going to bring your kids back home? I am. Who's going to make this country work? I am. So who's going to take care of your family? I will. So that's why I'm talking about a cultural transformation. This is huge. And it's irreversible. Yeah.
And do you expect, I mean, one of the tragedies is that the agony of Venezuela has been going on for so long that a lot of the exiles are now living, they're embedded in new lives in other countries. Their children have gone to school somewhere else. Sometimes they've married people. How much of your human resources do you think have been permanently lost? Or will you be able to inspire all of these people to uproot themselves and come back?
Well, that's my goal. I want to bring them one by one back. And I know you will regret it in many countries because of the great things they're doing there. Look, who will not come to the country that has the best weather all year long, that you have 2,000 kilometers of Caribbean coast with over 300 unexplored islands and the best people? We are happy. We don't have religious or racial or regional differences or social differences. We all want the same. This is going to be an unique, historic opportunity of building up from ruins a great nation that's going to be envied by the rest of the world. Who's not going to be part of it? And those that stay out, well, then we will have a, I don't know how do you say, captive market for tourism business, because I know they will be coming to visit their country many times.
Wonderful. I don't want to. I want to try and keep this to time, María Corina. So I'm just going to say: is there any other message you have for us? Is there anything that we should be doing at this moment? And be specific here. Should we?
Yes.
Should we be lobbying to evict the current people from your embassy and replace them with your representatives? Should we be trying to get the interest from your gold in the Bank of England made available to what we recognize as the alternative government? What do you need from us at this moment?
Great, all of the above and more. First of all, a sense of urgency. We have a window of opportunity. We need to act now. I mean, Maduro is in his weakest position ever. The only thing he's got left is repression, arms, and when you cut the flows, that start to crack. So this is the moment to act. Please, we need your voices speaking out, not only about the huge violation to human rights and tortures and disappearances that are taking place right now as we speak. This morning, I learned one of our colleagues in Los Teques was taken by the regime yesterday. So this is happening as we speak, but at the same time, pressing on Maduro and his system that they will be held accountable. The cost of impunity, they think it's zero. We need to let them know that it's not going to be that. We need the UK to put in place sanctions to individuals who have committed crimes. We need all the information that the financial system has about corruption and about the resources of the regime that end up in England to be told, to be made public. And certainly we need a strong alliance with the US and Europe to advance in these actions, global actions, and also the G7 to put pressure on the regime and create the incentives for this process to move ahead in a very short time. So believe me, these three elements, a growing pressure and organization that we are working on as we speak, international pressure and the fractures within the regime make a unique opportunity in a short term.
You obviously have contacts with the current administration in Washington, D.C. You're encouraged that they understand the gravity of the challenge and that they have the right approach?
Absolutely. Today, I can say that we have total strategic alignment and coordination with the US administration, and we have very good relations with the UK government as well that have been very, very supportive, as Canada's, Latin American, and other European countries, Italy, for example.
Very good. Well, Maria Corina, thank you for giving us your time. Thank you for everything you do. All of us in politics, sometimes think I'm unappreciated. I've had a bad day, but I think I can say with total certainty that none of us on this call is going through a 10th or 100th part of what you are. And you, believe me, you have all of our support and all of our goodwill. And we look forward immensely to coming and joining you in some of those unexplored 3,000 islands in a free Venezuela. But know that you are among friends here. And please understand that whenever you need international support, you just have to.
Thank you so much, Daniel. On behalf of all Venezuelan people and our team here, Isadora, David, Miguel, we want to work closely with you. We have many ideas of things that we can do. And I know that through you, our really good friend, Lord Hannon, we can make this happen in the short term. So thank you very, very much. And I know I will receive you soon in a free Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.